Hi, I'm Andy Otto, and I'm on the pastoral team at Ignatius House. Happy Easter. The author of this scripture reminds his audience that their love for the risen Christ is real, and that though Christ in the flesh is invisible, it's not a long-distance relationship. Christ's love is quite imminent. But the topic of suffering is also central to this passage. I'm always moved when I meet people who have experienced great suffering in their life, yet have such a love for Jesus, such a hopeful trust in their faith. The author is writing to Christians in Asia Minor who are being persecuted, suffering real trials as subjects of the Roman Empire. Suffering is one of the most real parts of being human. It's a reality we can be quick to deny or avoid because it seems nonsensical. One can imagine that the receivers of this letter are doing what any of us would do, struggle through the absurdity of suffering. Yet isn't it true that most religious traditions address this very real part of our humanity? This letter of Peter speaks of suffering as a way to test and refine one's faith, using the image of gold being tested in fire. Gold is refined by liquefying it and adding borax and soda ash, which separate out the pure gold from other trace metals present. Metaphorically, suffering can be redemptive in that it leaves behind a stronger faith. I recently came across a passage in the book of Sirach that offers another helpful metaphor. It says, "When a sieve is shaken, the refuse appears." Think about that. When a sieve is shaken with sand or dirt, the dirt falls through and something emerges from it, seen more clearly. Suffering is like this shaken sieve, revealing something that we need to see. Now, the metaphor of gold is interesting because throughout history, gold has been treated as real money that holds its value, even as fiat currencies have come and gone. Investors retreat to it when the dollar is weak and inflation is high. But as this scripture says, even gold is perishable, though we treat it as it is not. But your faith and hope is not perishable. When evil takes away security, health, and even life itself, all that is left to lean on is faith. A necessary trust in God emerges when the gold is tested or the sieve is shaken. Ignatius was clear that suffering in desolation and a sense of God's absence was not caused by God, but by the evil spirit. It was, however, an opportunity to examine the steadfastness of one's faith. We see such a steadfastness in the story of Job in the Hebrew Bible, who loses everything, yet remains ultimately trusting in his God. The author of this passage tells us that God has given us a new birth. What is our new birth? A birth to a living hope, given through the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Our witnessing this extraordinary act of testing or shaking reveals an extraordinary hope. And this gift from God is kept in heaven. In other words, this living hope is heavenly. And what is heavenly is of God. And what is of God is eternal, unfading. It's even better than gold. Our destiny, according to Thomas Merton, is not to be a bodiless spirit in the ether, but to be a member of the human race. He even calls this glorious, despite the absurdities of being human. The Christ does not so much redeem humanity by changing our humanity, but by glorifying it, right? By telling us that the fullness of our humanity comes in leaning on what is everlasting. What words of love and encouragement toward hope would be written in a letter to people today, suffering persecution and inhumane violence in places like Ukraine, Ethiopia, and Myanmar? Real human beings are suffering, fighting each other, acting out of fear. The story of Easter is that we're a people of hope, and that what we've been putting our stock in is not what is lasting, but what is fleeting. The Easter message tells us to get caught up in a larger truth, that the suffering of this world is not only temporary, but that what is heavenly can be realized now. It is not something just to wait for, but to make happen here and now. This is why the church has persisted long after Christ ascended. It's why Jesus asked us to build and live God's kingdom here and now. Let us be a people who are born into this living hope. All of us at Ignatius House wish you a truly blessed and hopeful Easter season.